army and demonstrators clash in Northern Ireland. One version of the event is told by an English voice.
Is that the Power Battalion fired 3 rounds altogether. After they'd had something between 10 and 20 fired at them from the area of the Rossville Flats over there.
Another by an Irish voice.
There was nothing fired at them, sir. I'm absolutely certain of that. I can speak of this without any difficulty whatsoever because I was there. I was just standing at the flats when the Saracens moved in first of all, and there was nothing fired at them, positively nothing fired at them.
Irish history is often the same story told in different voices. It's a history that is mirrored in the collision of 2 languages, English and Irish. A story of language as a loaded weapon. (1922), British troops on the streets of Dublin. British rule has been marked by centuries of bloody conflict, Irish against British, Catholic against Protestant. In the language battle between English and the Irish mother tongue, English may have won, but in the process it has been subtly transformed by its Celtic neighbor. In the 10th century, there was a flourishing Gaelic culture in Ireland. It was the golden age of Irish saints and scholars. This is the Book of Kells, described at the time as the chief relic of the Western world. The words are Latin, but the imagination and artistry are Celtic. Outside the monasteries, Ireland had one of the oldest written vernacular literatures in Europe. Today, Gaelic Ireland survives mainly on the west coast, in what's known as the Gaeltacht. Here in County Mayo, the people speak Irish Gaelic. This language has become identified with a way of life that can only flourish in the remoter, rural parts of Ireland.
Kilgaligone tar malsha, Kilgaligone. Tashar warda parigu, tiwa hui morango khunde, tiu here duigo khunde wuyo.
John Henry, or Sean O'Henyry, as he's known in Gaelic, is a storyteller, or Shanachi. He is renowned as one of the best fishermen in Kilgalligan. For him and other fishermen of the village, the world is exclusively Gaelic, and for them the local landmarks have only Irish names.
Heart and shaw. So some just at a team hall, the way that show. Kariki easy. Alt the mermaid. Yadra in the wheel. The white house. That's what I mean, I want to. Charlotte then Murdut Farland dealing ye, the virulence Shanini. Because I most do my hand on the person, I most Shandin is my lady, Tawhati Salam, Gulna Shalan, Hishinimi. It was a smaller higher.
Kilgalligan is one of the last Irish-speaking communities. It is the living embodiment of the Irish language today. The poet Seamus Heaney knows English and Irish.
The Irish language is not dead. It's sort of on hold, I would say. It's of mythic importance, insofar as a myth is an explanation of how things began, how things turned out, why we are as we are. So, whether it's alive or dead in terms of sociological terms, almost doesn't matter. It's mythically alive because it gives us origin.
At low tide in Kilgalligan, Pat Linney and his wife Mary are gathering cockles. Pat is a poet who composes in Irish and English, verse by verse.
Brón a scéala star na héans níor páirtar beag an chuas brón. Het na mílte agus déag na céit agus franiún éigor faoi líb camceáin. Ireland's history is painful reading. Each page and chapter relates her woe. Our loving children died as martyrs and in thousands slaughtered by the Saxon foe. Shengalar na with the dog with crache. Sechad law with that he left from the nail. The Kate blinds with the geary searcher. I tell you, it's just the history of Ireland in a nutshell, as you might say. But it's the truth anyway. And the truth is bitter. The truth is bitter. You're rushing off. Well, it's good bless your group, but you're on wash, kid.
I got on food on food.
So, chef food, touching. Yeah. Tom. I'm the last around here, I think. And, well, I am. I think I'm the last, link with the old poets now, the last. When I'll die, that's the end of it. When I'd meet St. Patrick, maybe he'd ask me to recite or to compose a verse.
Pat Linney is part of a rich oral tradition. Handed down on the lips of poets and storytellers, Irish Gaelic is still an important expression of Irish loyalty.
Well, it means a lot because, first and foremost, it's my native tongue, the Gaelic. And of course, as the old saying goes, the clearest sign of the utter degradation of any country is the abandonment of its native tongue. As Thomas Davis said, a nation without its language is only half a nation. Well, John.
Come on, away.
And this lovely land by God's command, a nation once again. The serfdom's yoke on the barrier broke. Triumphant shall we be. Our cause is just, to fight we must for faith and liberty. Fugru biagela. A trascot na céta, an ceolaí bhnéireach ar gláán agus slíomh. Brat chlas na héidean ag fallún sa géirí, faoin óras frame ar fud the lán an íomh. The soldiers sang our national anthem will re-echo from shore to shore, and our flag of green in esteem and honour will remain aloft forevermore. Sinnagah initial. Unbeatable.
Unbeatable is right.
"800 years ago, the decline of Gaelic began when the English language crossed the Irish Sea. English first invaded the coast of Ireland in 1170, a party of Anglo-Norman knights who settled in and around Wexford, and whose descendants spoke what one Elizabethan writer called the dregs of old ancient Chaucer English. In the beginning, the settlers became rapidly naturalized. Anglo-Norman names like Fitzgerald, Fitzwilliam, and Fitzmaurice became quintessentially Irish names, and some even adopted Irish Gaelic speech, to the disgust of other English visitors. Gradually, English became established on the big estates, but in the early days, these were English islands in a sea of Gaelic. Just 50 years after the landings in the south, the English took over the port of Dublin. It became the capital of what was called the English Pale. Beyond the Pale, as the saying went, were the unruly Gaelic-speaking Irish. The English consolidated this precarious foothold with a chain of castles. One of the finest is Trim Castle in County Meath. It marked the outer limit of the Pale and guarded a language as well as a political frontier. Sean Dufresne has studied how the Irish mother tongue was confronted by the rise of English sovereignty.
The Crown was always very conscious of the importance of language as a political tool and as an instrument of bringing about political unity. The Normans were described as becoming in time more Irish than the Irish themselves. This can be seen from the way in which they adopted the Irish customs. They intermarried with the Irish. They adopted the Irish law system. They patronized Irish poetry, Irish literature. They practiced the Irish system of fosterage of their children. And most important of all, they became Irish-speaking themselves.
Some Anglo-Irish lords even adopted Irish fashion and went barefoot.
The Crown always saw a close connection between language and culture and ultimately political allegiance in Ireland. One of the authorities said, if the tongue be Irish, the heart must needs be Irish too. So they saw it as an essential requirement that English be established if the Crown were to retain a secure hold on the country.
Under Elizabeth I, the tempo of settlement quickened. By the end of her reign, Ireland was, for the first time, under effective English rule. But Gaelic still flourished under the English crown. This Irish-English phrasebook was written specially for Elizabeth. The English language was established at a price. The poet Spenser, who witnessed English atrocities, wrote that their Irish victims spake like ghosts crying out of their own graves. Military conquest was quickly followed by civilian settlements. English families were planted throughout the South, dispossessing the Irish, who became tenants. Another side of Irish resistance to Elizabeth is found here. This is Blarney Castle, home of the legendary stone. During the reign of Elizabeth I, the castle was held by the local chieftain Cormac MacNeil-Lehrer. Elizabeth, who doubted his loyalty, demanded that he surrender the castle. MacNeil-Lehrer prevaricated for so long and so elaborately that in frustration Elizabeth is said to have exclaimed, "Blarney, Blarney, I will hear no more of this Blarney." The stone itself is fancifully said to be the stone of Jacob's dream brought to Ireland by the prophet Jeremiah. Others say it was originally part of the stone of Scone on which English kings and queens are crowned. To this day, the blarney means the gift of the gab, a way with words in a tricky situation. And if you kiss the stone, you're supposed to acquire the gift of eloquence. Can you help me?
Yes, sir.
Like this?
Yes, sir. Just reach back now and grab the two pipes. Walk your hands down and kiss the bottom section there. Very good.
Nearby Cork is the second city of Ireland and has flourished since the 16th century. Its speech is famously distinct from Dublin, retaining strong echoes of the Elizabethan settlement. Murphy's have been brewing traditional stout here in Cork since 1850. One man who's been working here for 34 years is master brewer Tommy Hosford.
I was born in Cork, in the north side of the city. I lived in Cork all my life, within a mile radius of Murphy's Brewery.
He speaks with a typical Cork accent, what many would call an Irish brogue.
I think the Cork people speak with a very pronounced accent.
His speech preserves characteristic pronunciations we know to be partly Elizabethan. Like William Shakespeare, Tommy says barley for barley.
Murphy's stout is made up of malt, hops, and roast barley. That's what gives it the black colour and such.
Open her up now, Rory.
Right.
In the hops.
That is something similar to brewing a pot of tea.
Open up to me.
As well as his Elizabethan pronunciations, Tommy's classic Irish rendering of thing as ting is a throwback to the native Gaelic.
There are a lot of things to think of, and, you know, keep an eye in the boil, and you won't get your dips up.
Dips up, turn off pumps. Take off work pipe.
And when the mark on the dip rod is reached by the liquor, that's the amount of actual liquor that makes the beer.
The characteristics of the English spoken by Tommy Hosford and Rory O'Connor come from Irish Gaelic and Elizabethan English. These are the two main influences on what we call the Irish accent of English.
I just feel that every time I buy a pint of Murphy's stout in my own small way, I'm paying back to Murphy's or our family or whoever's on the place for the employment that I'm getting there, which enabled me to educate and we are a family. Without that job, I just know where I'd have to emigrate the same as thousands more.
Came to that point, I'd say, in 1951, before I did get a job in the brewery. That, if I hadn't got the job in the brewery at that stage, it looked like that emigration was the job. There was nothing to it, only emigration.
Oliver Cromwell's campaign in Ireland in 1649 created the first wave of Irish emigration. Cromwell passed through the land, it was said, like a lightning and shipped 12,000 prisoners to the Caribbean, giving rise to a new verb. This terrible protector, wrote one contemporary, is very apt to Barbados, an unruly man. Another destination was Montserrat. Some Irish first came here as early as the 1650s. As well as their accent, they left place and family names scattered across the island. Places like Kinsale and Galway, and names like Daly, Sweeney, Ryan, and Alan.
Well, the Irish people came to Munster on account of Cromwell, where was exiled. We heard they had some fighting there, and the Irish people came and they was inside. So they was sent out of the island. So and we are some of the older descendant remains.
The scattering Irish also took their accents and language to the foggy shores of Newfoundland.
Take me back to that snow-green cove, where the seas roll up their thunder. There let me rest in the earth's cool breast, where the stars shine out their wonder, and the seas roll up their thunder.
They first came to Newfoundland waters as seasonal cod fishermen. By the 18th century, they were settled along the south coast in communities that are still reminiscent of their homeland.
They were trained singers, and they were trained dancers. If you see them stepping, I don't know, are these good in Ireland today, is what they are, them step dancers. Dear, my goodness, the gracious of heaven. If you only just see them dancing.
In Ireland, another legacy of the Cromwellian settlement was the emergence of an Anglo-Irish ruling class, known as the Ascendancy.
Well, I would imagine at the beginning of the 17th century that they would have had to have learned Irish, but after the Act of Union, where the centre of influence and power was really shifted to London, there was really not a necessity, or seemed to be a necessity, to be able to speak Irish, which I think is somewhat of a tragedy.
Lord Henry, the Earl of Mount Charles, is Irish. His family have lived here since the 17th century. But his accent is almost indistinguishable from that of the British aristocracy.
I think that English as a language was very much spoken amongst families like mine that were associated with the Ascendancy, largely because it was through the Ascendancy and attachment to, say, the Protestant cause that power and influence lay.
The family home, Slane Castle, is strategically sited on the River Boyne. It's a few miles from the site of the Battle of the Boyne. Here in 1690, the Protestant armies of King William defeated the Catholic forces of Old Ireland and decided the victory of the Orange over the Green.
The family displayed a sort of extraordinary degree of sure-footedness at the Battle of the Boyne, because we actually succeeded in fighting on both sides. And one particular member of the family deserted when he reckoned the battle was going in King William's favour. And ever since then, we really did benefit during that period by our attachment to the Williamite cause, or the Protestant cause. The Anglo-Irish, or the Ascendancy, performed a form of linguistic imperialism in this country, largely because to be Protestant, to be able to speak English, to be culturally and linguistically linked with England meant better status, better prospects of promotion. Adherence to the Protestant cause did a great deal to damage the Gaelicness, the Irishness, the traditional Irishness of this country. So therefore, for centuries, to be linked with the Ascendancy was a meal ticket, a linguistic meal ticket.
During the 18th century, English continued to advance. In 1800, perhaps more than half the population spoke Irish, but 100 years later, more than 85% spoke only English. The cause of this linguistic upheaval was the potato famine. Hunger and hardship had always driven the Irish into exile. Now they fled their homes by the million. The Irish lived mainly on potatoes. For several years, the crop failed, and they starved. It was catastrophic. English and Irish observers described horrific scenes.
6 famished and ghastly skeletons were huddled in a corner on some filthy straw. And 2 frozen corpses were found lying upon the mud floor, half devoured. A mother was seen the same day to drag out the corpse of her child and leave it half covered with stones.
The Great Famine of the 1840s almost destroyed the Irish and their language. Perhaps 1 million died, many of them Gaelic-speaking. Millions more fled abroad to Britain and the United States, where they were forced to speak English. But perhaps most poignant of all, the Irish rejected their Gaelic as the cause of all their troubles and embraced English for the chance of a better future. By the turn of the century, even in the remote villages, they were beginning to speak the lyrical, eloquent speech that is now known as Irish English. The English-speaking world was enriched with words like smithereens, brat, shenanigan, bother, tantrum, and galore. But more fundamental are the direct translations of Gaelic idioms. These photographs of Aran Islanders were taken by the playwright J.M. Singh. The new kind of English he heard on their lips was the inspiration for his most famous play, The Playboy of the Western World.
You'd be destroyed listening.
Don't be letting on to be shy. A fine, treacherous game, lad.
The play tells of Christy Mahan, the man who boasts that he's killed his father. Until he's exposed, Christy and his story fascinate the women of the village.
Oh, there's maybe worse than a dry heart and a widow woman and your glass at night. So you hit him then?
Go on, says he, or I'll have the devil making garters of your limbs tonight. You will not if I can help it, says I.
Oh, you were right, surely.
With that, the sun came out between the clouds and the hill and it's shining green on my face. God have mercy on your soul, says he, lifting aside. Or on your own, says I, raising the law.
Oh, that's a grand story. Tells it lovely.
He gave a drive to the side, and I gave a left to the east. Then I turned round with my back to the north and hit him a blow on the ridge of his skull, laid him stretched out. And he split to the knob of his gullet.
He was very aware that there was a great consciousness of the Western world, as he calls it in his plays, and that in fact that their own language and their own traditions were disappearing for economic reasons. And I think it's that consciousness that gives the tension to all of his work.
What'll I be doing now, I ask you? And I a kind of a wonder.
These actors from the west of Ireland are preparing for their production of The Playboy. They're all Gaelic speakers, so they bring a special sympathy to their rehearsal of Singh's Irish-English dialogue. The pronunciation of story as story, for example, comes directly from Irish Gaelic.
You said story there, Melissa.
Yeah, well, again, I'm not sure, whether it's story, spud, spud, or whatever, you know.
I know, this is our problem, isn't it? There is no general rule for it. It varies from meaning to meaning. In this case, I do hear it a story. Would you agree?
Yes, definitely. I mean, I hate using SHs where I can
avoid them. Yes, because it's such a cliche of the accent. As a theatre company located in Galway, we're still in what's called a Gaelic area, where Irish is still used. We hear it on the streets. We use it from time to time, or phrases of it ourselves when we're working. I think that fact puts us in closer touch with the structures and rhythms of the language than we would be otherwise.
There he is now, and he crossing the strands. And that the Lord God would send a high wave to wash him from this world.
Have you no shame?
If you go through the structure of some of Singh's sentences, you see that they clearly refer back to Irish structure rather than English structure.
Haven't I after seeing the love light of the star of knowledge shining from her brow? And hearing words would put you thinking on the holy Bridget speaking to the infant saints. And now she'll be turning again and speaking hard words to me.
There in the second speech, haven't I after seen the love light of the star of knowledge? Now that's an extraordinarily difficult one. Let's translate that into Irish and see how much do we have to push around the sentence structure. Right. And see whether it's very similar or not. I suggest that it probably is very similar if we do that.
Nach bhfuil me díreach tréis solas grá réalt an ólis echo excited on Aiden.
On Aiden, yeah.
And I after seeing the love light of the star of knowledge shining from her brow.
No problem.
Yeah.
And it also, in a sense, suggests the intonation, because the way it's written in Irish, it's almost am and I after. It's the same way. Do you not see? Nach bhfuil me tréis.
The wild red on here.
Singh always defended the authenticity of his dialogue. He spoke of Irish English as rich and living, and of the Irish imagination as fiery and magnificent and tender.
There now, drink a health to the wonders of the Western world. The pirates, preachers, potching makers, with the jobbing jockeys, parching peelers, and the juries fill their stomachs selling judgments of the English.
That's a grand tosh, Sarah Tansy. Now, Christy.
Singh's transformation of the vernacular was soon to be overshadowed by another Irishman, James Joyce, one of the greatest writers of English in the story of the language. Joyce, who universalized the Irish experience, left Dublin for good in 1904 at the age of 22, declaring that he went to forge in the smithy of his soul the uncreated conscience of his race. His work is full of Dublin, and he devoted his long exile in Europe to the world he'd left behind. Should Dublin ever be destroyed, he once claimed, it could be recreated from the pages of his novels. He once said that after his death, the name found engraved on his heart would be Dublin. David Norris of Trinity College, Dublin, is a passionate Joyce scholar.
For Joyce and for an Irish writer, English is not quite to the same extent an instinctual method of speech. Ulysses is a great experiment in language. Joyce, in a way, revenges himself for the taking away of the Irish language by the English, and after the 800 years of occupation, takes the English language and smashing it up into smithereens and hands it back and says, "This is our revenge." And he makes the character Shem boast in Finnegan's Wake that he will wipe any English spook or multiphoniaxically spuking off the face of the earth. Joyce caught the flavour and intonation of the Dublin accent better than any other writer, and particularly the conversation of pubs. He caught the phrases that people would use in their ordinary, everyday speech.
The fellow's a gangster, you know.
I didn't think it was, I reckon.
In fact, he quoted so effectively that very often a good pub is known affectionately as a Joycean pub, in which, as in the Cyclops episode of Ulysses, the characters would be hanging around, as Joyce describes them, waiting for what the sky would drop in the way of a drink. And coming out with these marvellously colourful phrases, like, I declare to God I was blue mouldy for the want of that pint. I could hear it hit the pit of me stomach with a click, which is a lovely description, if you think of it, of somebody who's dying for a drink.
Something always goes wrong.
And this is the setting for the chapter in the novel of Ulysses titled Cyclops. And this is the voice of the nameless narrator, the typical quintessence of the Irish pub. But begob, I was just lowered in the heel of the pint when I seen the citizen getting up to waddle to the door, puffing and blowing with the dropsy, and he cursing the curse of Cromwell on him, bell, buke and candle in Irish, spitting and spatting out of him, and Joe and little Alf round him to peacify him. Let me alone, says he. And begob, he got as far as the door and they holding him, and he bawls out of him, 3 cheers for Israel. Or sit down on the parliamentary side your ass, for Christ's sake, and don't be making a public exhibition of yourself. Jesus, there's always some bloody clown or other kicking up bloody murder about bloody nothing. Gob, it'd turn the porter sick in your stomach, so it would.
His self-consciousness about language, I think, is almost a natural thing in a nation and in a culture where the loss of a language was only, what, half a century behind Joyce, and the mastery of the other language was only literally achieved in his lifetime, and the relationship between the two and the possibility of seeing a language die and acquiring a new one makes you aware that language is not a natural thing at all. It's a thing that you create. The English speaker of the English language assumes that English is a natural fact of life. The Irish speaker of the English language doesn't have that secure an assumption.
Wait till the honeying of the loon, love. Die, Eve, little Eve, die. We see that wonder in your eye. We'll meet again. We'll part once more, the spot I'll seek if the hour you'll find. My chart shines high where the blue milk's upset. Forgive me quick, I'm going, goodbye. And you pluck your watch, forget me not, your even load, so saved to journey's end.
Perhaps no writer since Shakespeare has so transformed our idea of the language, and no writer after Joyce can ignore his achievement. The ultimate exploration of English as a language foreign to Ireland is in his last novel, Finnegan's Wake. Here, Joyce, who knew many languages himself, creates an entirely new tongue.
Joyce, in Finnegan's Wake, uses this new language system to reflect the shattered experience of the Irish, leading to their dispersal all over the world. And in a very moving section, he describes this, and he's able to encapsulate it in just one sentence, where he says, "Where now are all her children say, in kingdom gone, or power to come, or glory be to them, Father. All alluvial, all alluvial, some here, more no more, more again lost, and a stranger."
Like Joyce, generations of Irish since the famine looked abroad for a better future. For many, the first port of call was Liverpool, then a thriving Victorian metropolis. Some were in transit to America, but others could afford to go no further. The Liverpool accent, unique in England, is a direct product of this Irish settlement. The Irish still cross the sea to Liverpool. Today it's for the big match between Liverpool Football Club and its local rival, Everton. Among the 50,000 supporters, there are plenty of enthusiastic Dubliners, and it's no accident that Dubliners and Merseysiders share many similarities of speech. These fans are Dubliners.
Oh, well, we got in, right, we only sat in the seat, and it was a goal, Dalglish. Super, you know, 20 seconds, first shot of the game, right in the back of the net. Couldn't believe it, you know. And they go up 2-0 up. Everton weren't even in the game, you know. 3-0 up by half-time. Just couldn't believe it.
They got 2 back. Another couple of minutes now, I think they would have got the third. A little bit of luck, they might have got the third. And I'd have been more than happy with a draw anyway.
Listen to a Liverpudlian, and the similarities are clear. Notice the pronunciation of back.
In the second half, Everton started well and pulled one back. I don't know who scored, actually. To make it 3-1. And then there was a lot of Everton pressure.
They come back a bit in the second half, brought another player on up front, that was really good. They just, the finish wasn't up to Everton's standards, and it really should have been.
The match itself was brilliant.
Yeah, great. Dream game, like, you know. It's pretty hard, look.
From Liverpool docks, many Irish, down on their luck, embarked for the land of opportunity, the United States of America.
I am a rambling Irishman. In Ulster I was born in, and many's the happy hours I spend on the banks of sweet Loch Erin. For to live poor I could not endure, as others of my station. To Mary Kay I sailed away and left this Irish nation. Right Anton-na, Anton-na, right Anton-na.
St. Patrick's Cathedral, New York. The Irish had always been pioneers in the New World. In the 19th century, nearly 5 million emigrated here. Today, some 40 million Americans sentimentally claim Irish descent. St. Patrick's Day celebrations are a vivid reminder of Ireland's special grip on America's imagination.
Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Peter Martin is on duty today as a sergeant in the 1st Precinct. And like thousands of New York police officers, he has Irish ancestors.
Command, stand out on task force.
Mazzelli, M-A-Z-Z. E-L-L-I. 24628.
Okay. First, police officer.
The Irish influence on American pronunciation is controversial. But notice how, like the Irish and many New Yorkers, Peter Martin says yous for the plural of you.
Around the corner, 7 West 55th. There's a hall there, but I want to know where yous are before yous go, so let me know. Okay, as I said, it should be a good tour. It's a happy day. Hopefully we won't have any problems. Make the best of it. No drinking, no smoking. Does anybody have any questions? We're just getting rid of it altogether, keeping these people out from here.
It's a good detail because I enjoy the parade.
If I wasn't working, I'd be here on my own time.
Of course, well, but of course.
The Guinness is green. People dye their hair green. It's a fun day. Everybody who's not Irish is Irish on St. Patrick's Day.
Ballinlough in County Roscommon is Peter Martin's family home.
I came back here for my first time 15 years ago because I wanted to see for myself all the great stories that I heard from my mother and father about their youth.
Every year, thousands of Americans make the nostalgic pilgrimage to their homeland in search of their roots.
My son is 12 years old, and myself and my wife felt it was important for him to see it and to be proud of it and hopefully to tell his children.
Are they going in here now?
No, fella.
What?
Some tea, Peter?
Yes. No.
Some Irish tea. I think a greenhorn could get a job. They were beyond their years.
Peter Martin's mother left Ireland in the 1930s, as her sister vividly remembers.
Peter's mother went over to get employment. Simple as that. And that's why we all went. There was nothing here. We had to go. We earn a living. We were very lonely. For a long time, it took a while. But you had got to stay there. No ways to come back. No money.
But I find it great that yourself and your sister, Mary, who was that you did come back.
Mary was engaged beyond to get married in America, and she came home here and met her future husband and got married.
And Mary, even after having a good taste of America.
I thought she'd never stay.
Doesn't seem like 15 years.
It doesn't, you know. Doesn't, no, I didn't
think it was that sitting in the same kitchen like this.
I know.
It seems the same.
It's great, though, to see people coming back. The nature they have for coming back.
I think it's good to come back and see where your roots are.
This is my grandparents, your great-grandparents. 1954, 1961. 9 years old when my grandfather died.
But there is another side to Peter Martin's Ireland. On the streets of Belfast in the north, language is still a political weapon. Here, in the midst of the Troubles, Irish Gaelic is being revived. It is still illegal to put up Irish street signs, but it's a law rejected by the Republican community. La, meaning day, is the only daily newspaper published entirely in Irish. These Belfast children are learning Irish. It's the only school in Northern Ireland where the first language is Irish.
Éanon Darbanium. Glegin and Kevin have Glegin. Look at you, Harla the Glegin. Could you Harla the Glegin?
Fell over its nest and it was sick.
And Kevin Latin scale of Yogan and Ye Frida Nora with Liam. And Kevin Latin scale shin.
She hasn't got anything to play with. She went in to her mummy and her mummy told her to go out.
But the front line of the language war is in the H-blocks, known officially as the Maze Prison, and to inmates as Long Kesh. Many Republican prisoners held here are now taking lessons in Irish Gaelic.
I was in Long Kesh, 9 years altogether. I was in for armed robbery and possession of weapons and membership to the IRA.
Paddy Malloy, imprisoned as a Republican activist, learnt Irish during his sentence here. For him, it was as much a political statement as refusing prison dress, the protest known as going on the blanket.
On the blanket, it means you're confined to a cell 24 hours a day. You had no papers, you had no written material or anything of that sort. So the emphasis was on the spoken language. As soon as I got into one of the wings in the H-Block, the first thing was asked was, Mill Ian Gaelic Galgutsa. That's, have you got any Gaelic? And I said I had, you know, at every single word that you had and every sort of phrase, you had to give it out. You more or less shout it out the door. People wrote it down on the walls and that sort of stuff and learned it. They pulled it. There was people in the H-Blocks from all over Ireland. So the Gaelic that was given out was a sort of a mixture of the Gaelic dialects from the 4 different provinces, which meant that you would have people speaking part of Ulster Gaelic and part of Munster Gaelic all sort of mixed together. And when you get out, there was a sort of a confusion in that it was a mixture of all the dialects put together. People outside called it the Gaeltacht Irish. You know, the Gaeltacht is an Irish-speaking area. So the H-Blocks then they would call it the Gaeltacht.
Learning Irish Gaelic has become a political gesture in Northern Ireland today, but it is largely symbolic. Catholics and Protestants, the British Army and the IRA, all sides in this age-old conflict speak English. And although Irish English, like the island that made it, is still in a state of flux, some Irish writers now believe that it, not Gaelic, is the only realistic means of Irish self-expression.
You see, the problem of Irish English is that everything in this country, from accent to pronunciation to place names to the name of a city, like the city we're in today, Derry or Londonderry, all of these things carry a political charge. And I feel that there is a very intimate relationship between the non-appearance of a standard accent or a standard tone or a standard Irish way of speaking English and the non-appearance of a standardized Irish political settlement that people could take for granted.
So to speak your own language and to get a trust in the pronunciation and in the quirks of vocabulary and so on is, and to give yourself permission to do that, is to go through a kind of political enabling also. You could take it back to Joyce and sing. I mean, what they were doing was fortifying people who were weak because their language hadn't been written for them. So in that way, in a small way, within the Northern Irish context, one was trying to give confidence, I suppose, to the culture here. I remember a good example of this. I used to have to ring, when I was in London, an exchange in Northern Ireland called Coach, C-O-A-G-H. And I would ask the operator for Coach. She would say, oh, how are you spelling that? I say, C-O-A-G-H. She'd say, oh, Coa. And for a moment you felt, you know, I can't, this is obviously the standard English pronunciation. But things changed enormously, emotionally and politically, when I realized she couldn't say Coch. She was at a disadvantage. It just depends whose language is the privileged one, you know?
For Seamus Heaney, the spirit of Gaelic still haunts the English speech of the whole island. Separated from England by sea and by culture, but joined by a tragic history, the Irish have taken a foreign language and are making it their own. The roll call of Irish writers, from Spencer to Synge, from Joyce to Heaney, shows that the literary genius of the forgotten Celtic centuries is not dead, but simply translated. And the Irish themselves may find in the accents of their English an escape from the prison of their history.